time travel in a box? All this and more on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Musical pies.
Elden Boy game ring.
Happy birthday, Blazkowicz.
And it's the internet, Jen.
All this and more on This Week in Retro.
Dave, you're back. It's not Neil.
I'm back. No, I'm not Neil.
Excellent. That's
Excellent.
fantastic.
Are you pleased?
Yes, I am pleased, actually. It was really good to have you on last time, and it's good to have you back. And what have you been up to? Fill us in.
Well, I've been finishing off my game collecting. I've been scouring eBay to finish off the last gaps in the collection. I've nearly got everything I want. My shelves are nearly full. Next up in my agenda is hardware repairs. I might even look at fixing my Atari monitor. I had the SC1435, the one you want for the ST, which died the other week. Sadly, it just is gone. So I might be taking that apart and trying to fix it. What about yourself? What are you up to?
Well, tomorrow we've got the Perth Amiga users group meet, so that's exciting. That's always really good. And when I've said this before, I'll say it again. When we say Amiga users group, they really do bring anything. You know, there's going to be all sorts of machines there, even Atari STs, Dave. So that should make you happy. All sorts of machines. Hopefully Vectrexes again, because I'm determined to actually have a go on one this time. And one of my friends has actually got a working Philips G7000. Mine's not working, so he's going to take his along. So I might be able to relive some old childhood memories on that as well. So that'd be great. And other than that, got myself sucked into yet another high score challenge. I'm not going to go hardcore on this one. Well, I say that now, but it's Pinball Dreams, and I was more of a Pinball Fantasies guy, and
so was I.
PC for that.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But this high score challenge, my current submission is 14.9 million, which I actually achieved on the A500 Mini, by the way, just sitting on my couch with the boxed in controller.
I guess that proves there's not significant latency on it then.
Well, let me say this here. I'm at 14.9 million. The score to beat at the moment is 80 million. So I don't think there's latency, but if I can't get to 80 million, then I'm going to blame latency. I think that's
good idea. Good idea.
Yeah. What about yourself? Been playing much?
I've been playing Dungeon Master. For the month of May's Game Club for Retro Asylum podcast, they do a game of the month for listeners to join in and play, and I'm a listener. So I found game clubs are, I guess, high score challenges, which you're doing, are a fantastic way of motivating me and forcing myself to actually play the games rather than put it aside until I do something else first. Dungeon Master might be my most played game. I love it. It's an absolutely wonderful dungeon crawler. The levels are well made. It's balanced, and when you play later games, you can see where they've gone wrong. Whereas Dungeon Master is nice and simple and tight. And I'm also about to drive down to see Neil at the cave for the colouring in the cave event.
Oh, that'll be fantastic. You're going down for the colouring in the cave. So you got the colouring book. I've got the colouring book. Do you know my problem with the colouring book? And I love it. Neil, we love your book. I don't want to ruin it.
Well, you can print off the PDF and you can colour in the PDFs, but it's not quite the same, is it?
Well, it might be better.
Maybe you should have bought two. Maybe you should buy another one.
Lines, Dave.
Maybe everybody should buy another one.
Everybody should buy two. One to colour in and one to keep unspoiled. Yeah, cool. You could colour it in tartan, Dave.
I could. I won't. I could.
That, actually, I'm very jealous that you're going to the cave, because obviously I do, and hopefully it'll be later this year that I will hopefully get there. But yeah, we'll see. I have also, don't take offence at me asking this question, Dave, but I've seen floating around on the interwebs an Xbox controller that is a Scottish flag. Have you felt the need to buy one to remind yourself of where you come from?
I don't ever forget. I haven't seen the one of the Scottish flag, but I have seen very recently the Microsoft Xbox controller with tartan on it. And it's proper official tartan. They've got it registered. I don't know if it's now the Xbox or the Microsoft tartan, whichever it is, but it's proper official tartan. It's a bit too green for my like. I prefer blue and purples in my tartan. But having seen the tartan one, then I think maybe the one with the Solitaire, which is the the saltire is the name for the Scottish flag with the St Andrew's cross, seems a bit less offensive. So maybe I'll get a skin for my controller and get the Scottish flag on it. Maybe.
Nice.
Maybe.
Yeah. That'd be nice. Yeah.
Now, with Neil not being here, I understand he left you some homework to do. How did you get on with that?
Did he? He's told tales. We should probably explain as well to the listeners, just because we've had to slightly change the recording schedule. Last week's episode hasn't aired at time of recording, so yeah, that's why you wouldn't have heard Neil give me the homework. And yes, he did indeed give me homework, Dave, and it was to play Neighbours on the Amiga.
Everybody needs good neighbours.
They do need good neighbours, and Neighbours needs a good game is the assumption I've come to, or the conclusion I've come to.
Does it have a good game?
No, I don't think so. Look, in all honesty, yes, I have done my homework, and I've played it for about 10 minutes, which is probably more than most people could stomach. It reminds me of that hoverboarding level on Back to the Future 2 for reasons I'm not sure. I was a bit disappointed. I thought I was choosing my character on the opening menu, and of course I could choose to be Bronwyn. Why wouldn't you? And no, I was actually just choosing who I was racing against. Yeah, Kylie was at the start, and Bronwyn was at the far end. But all you're doing is choosing how many of the neighbours you're racing against in a unexplained skateboard race around the block. And yeah, it's just as if you remember Back to the Future 2 and how frustrating that hoverboard level was. You've played Neighbours in your head then, because it's exactly the same feeling of just having zero control, zero notice of what's coming up. There's a pothole, and for whatever reason, despite whatever you do, you can't seem to avoid it, and not a pleasant experience. But I'll see what else the game has in store. Maybe there are other levels that I'll enjoy more, but I'm not holding out much hope at all. So yes, I did, but I think we should get into today's stories. I don't want to talk about it any more than that, Dave. Let's do it.
So the first story today is submitted by Reese, Control Reese, musical pies. So do you like pies, Chris? I like a cherry pie, or an apple pie, or a steak pie, or a Scotch pie, or a pumpkin pie, or even pucker pies I like. Do you like pies, Chris?
I do indeed, Dave. And you're talking about my kind of pies now. So even today, in fact, not a word of a lie, went out to one of my favourite patisseries and had a nice beef and chili pie. What do you ask?
Well, there's another kind of pie that we like, which is a raspberry pie. And among loads of other projects is maybe my favourite Raspberry Pi project. It's the MT32 pie from Dale Winham, also known as Dopefish. I've been closely following this project since I first heard about it in 2020. And I got it working for the first time, I think about 18 months ago, with Edu Arana's hat for the Pi, which he calls the Pi Midi, which I think is the first hardware released for Dale's MT32 Pi project. You can see it there. It's just a little Pi sitting on, attached to a hat, which gives you the MIDI in and the outputs and so on. Dale started the project in 2017, but he wasn't happy with it running in Linux, so he set it aside and came back to it in 2020 as a lockdown project on Circle and released it in GitHub in July 2020. The project is a port of Munt. So Munt is a Roland MT32 emulator that's been about for years and years and years. I've used it from a long time ago onwards with X-Wing and TIE Fighter, among other games. The sound improvement over the Sound Blaster is phenomenal. Dale's project is porting Munt to a bare metal Pi implementation using Circle. A bare metal Pi implementation using Circle. What that means is it means that it runs on a very, very close to the metal operating system. It doesn't use much of an operating system, so there's no kind of overheads, nothing else going on in the background. It can run cleanly. So he's done that, and then later he added another program called Fluid Synth to the project. So that gives you general MIDI support. So you then have the MT32 for the older games like Monkey Island, Sierra games, etc., and also you've got the general MIDI support for later games like Doom. Original hardware is difficult to get hold of and expensive. So original MT32s, the older than new, or the different variants, are very expensive, very difficult to get. some of them break down, and the later ones, the general MIDI ones, are expensive as well. SC55, SC88. So this little project allows you to have all of that in a little pie, in a little form factor that's ideal, in your hands, much cheaper. And I think it gives you certainly just as good, but I actually think it's better than owning the originals, because you would have to have several different MT32, so it's several different MT32s to have what you have with an MT32 Pi.
That sounds cool. I recall even back in the day, these were, prohibitively expensive to get your hands on, and they seem to have got even worse as time's gone on. So yeah, what's Dale come up with now? Then sounds interesting.
So he's now created and has started to sell his own hardware for his own project. So this is, I guess you could say, this is the official hardware for the MT32 Pi project. His is in a neat 3D printed case with a stand, if you want it, in a choice of colours, with a decently sized screen so you can see the secret messages that some games put out. Space Quest 3, for example, put a little message that would appear on your MT32 screen if you had one that said "Insert Buckazoid." It's nice to get those little things that nobody else would know about. The project's become also really popular in the Mister community, really popular there. And his new hardware has an experimental option for a signal enhancer to try and deal with some of the problems caused by longer cables. So he put the hardware up for sale, and within 2 minutes, the enhanced one sold out. Literally 120 seconds gone. And within a couple of days, they'd all sold out. Everything sold.
Wow.
And he didn't expect that at all. I'm all right, though. I did manage to get one. So he's going to have to get that soldering iron out again, and maybe he'll end up with as big a print farm as Neil and Richard will. Now, my favourite MT32 soundtrack is from Dune. I think it fits the tone of the novel and the game so well. I even bought the CD of the soundtrack back in the day. The Ultima games that support MT32 sound fantastic too. And of course, everyone loves how good LucasArts games sound with it as well. Have you played around with MT32 or even general MIDI music in your favourite games? I know that you're an X-Wing fan, and have you heard the wonderful iMuse, the way that the LucasArts had the music change based on what was happening in the games? Have you heard that with in the way that LucasArts wanted us to?
Look, that's a very good question, and it delves deep into how I felt when I first moved over to PC, and X-Wing was one of the first games I got my hands on. So let's tackle the first part. No, I never had access to an MT32 or any MIDI device back in the day, and part of that problem was my assumption that these were designed for musicians or for studios, recording studios, that kind of thing. And part of that would have been because of the price I saw attached to them. I really didn't assume this was something that you added externally to your PC, keeping in mind most other upgrades are internal, to make games sound better because they were expensive. And even buying a PC at that period, and I jumped over in around 92 into 93, I think is when I jumped. It's a bit of a blurred memory.
Same as me.
But, yeah, okay. So that's when you jumped from the ST?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's when I jumped from the Amiga. And what I ended up with was a used 386DX, because that's all I could afford, with 4 meg of RAM and a 65 meg hard drive. And, initially I'd start playing games and all I got was these internal speaker farts and beeps. At least it was an Amstrad that I bought, actually. And one of the good things was it had quite a good quality speaker inside, and it had a volume knob to control the speaker of the internal speaker of the PC, which very few PCs with internal speakers had. It was either on or off, but complete and utter disappointment sound-wise from what I was used to from the Amiga. So, of course, one of my first upgrades was a Sound Blaster card, which was, for me, was Sound Blaster 16, or it was the Creative Labs Sound Blaster Pro 2, I think is what it was called.
That's the one before the 16, yeah. The Pro 2 is
it was the one before. Okay, and then the 16 became the one everybody cloned afterwards, wasn't it? Yeah, basically, you would buy a Sound Blaster Pro, a Sound Blaster 16 compatible. Generally,
the Pro 2 was cloned as well. The Pro 2 and the 16 were the two kind of popular ones.
Yeah. So that was one of the first things I inserted into my PC, and of course, the game sounded better. But compared to what I was used to on the Amiga, yes, there was more channels or voices, or however you term it, for it to use. but it didn't sound as good. It didn't sound as full and as rich. And where I noticed that specifically is in the music for X-Wing, which is great. And, you know, how the music changes, as you mentioned, depending on what's happening within the game is, you know, it's such a good way to do it. And so engaging. But especially it was mainly the percussion instruments, and particularly the snare. It just sounded like a wet fart. And I hope nobody's offended by the word fart, but that's what it sounded like compared to what I was used to from the Amiga. So yes, you've got more channels, but if you got fart noises coming out of those channels, you're not really gaining anything. Some of it was, of course, very good. So, you know, the laser blast from the X-Wing sounded like something I would hear in the movie. So that was pleasing. But the music just sounded wrong. So then you get into games like Doom, and part of my thinking was, keeping in mind I had a 386DX, so Doom didn't play great anyway. Part of my thinking, which was probably wrong, was, well, if I stop it playing the music, then maybe that gives a little bit more resources for it to play the game better. It didn't really work like that, but anyway. But also, it's not, the music back then isn't something I really got into, so I would just play my own music, and I got into playing Rage Against the Machine and Therapy, so very aggressive, very heavy music, running around Mars or hell, depending on, you know, where you progress to, blasting everything away with a shotgun or a chain gun. In fact, it was at this point, one of the very few times in my life, Dave, right, when my dad came into the room. I'm playing Doom. I'm a gamer, right? I'm playing Doom on my PC. I've got a blackout blind over my window to get rid of the screen glare, but that means my entire room is in darkness in the middle of the day. And I've got this boombox above my desk blaring out Rage Against the Machine. And my dad comes in and he has a chat with me to ask, is everything all right, Chris? Are you doing all right? Is there anything you need to talk about? Because they were worried about me, because this is what I was spending my time doing. And then it was either my dad came in at another occasion when I was doing the same thing, or they might have sent my brother in for this one to ask if I was on drugs. Literally, that was the result of me spending my time doing this. But, you know, proudly say, not judging anyone, but I've never touched drugs, but I have touched Doom and Rage Against the Machine at the same time, and that's probably a pretty close experience. But the reason why I say that is I did that because of, you know, the sound out of the Sound Blaster wasn't particularly great if you're into music, so that was my preference to actually play something, and that was on audio cassette, but I still deemed that as better. So it's only recently that I've started to hear how good these games should have sounded, how they were intended to sound, thanks to videos on the internet by people like LGR and Control-Alt-Reese, and they sound amazing. So, you know, part of me wants to say I missed out back in the day, Dave, but to be honest, I never had that kind of cash to splash around on equipment like this. So, yeah, I didn't really get to hear games how they were intended, to be honest.
Maybe the Amiga spoiled you. The ST is what I had, and I switched to PC maybe 6 months before you, so around about the same time, and it was a 386DX I moved to as well. But
cool.
Maybe the Amiga spoiled you. The ST could do tracking music. The ST could sound just as good as the Amiga does with tracking music, but it was heavy on the CPU. The Amiga could do it properly on Paula. The ST couldn't, so it just didn't happen in game for us. So you might got it in the title menu, like Speedball 2 come up, you got that great music, but in the game you got music on the YM chip, which is fairly similar, along the same lines to what you would get with an OPL. The OPL is actually better. So for me, I didn't notice that downgrade. The PC could actually do it though. The PC could do music in the same way that Amiga did. You mentioned Pinball Dreams and Pinball Fantasies earlier on. If you played Pinball Fantasies on the PC, you got really what you could call Amiga style music, because it wasn't done through MIDI. It wasn't done through the synthesizer. Yeah. It was done through the digital audio side of things. So digital audio, is that the right way to explain it? Whatever it was done through kind of sample things. It was done through a mod basically. But when you hear, and it's a long time ago when I heard them for the first time, because months been around for that long. When I heard them for the first time properly, the difference is incredible. It's much better with the MT32 or the general MIDI sound. So closing thoughts on this. Thank you for submitting this, Reese. Dale does say that he will make more available and he'll put them back on sale. I did drop a message, I dropped a little email, and he did reply, and since he's from Newcastle, I will try to do it in his voice. I've been blown away with how quickly they've sold, so I'm very thankful to the community for their support. And I hope to... No, he is from Newcastle, but he doesn't have a thick accent. He's got a very, very, very clear, easy to understand, soft accent. I'm being cruel here. What he says is, I've been blown away with how quickly they've sold, so I'm very thankful to the community for their support, and I hope to make some more available in the next few months. I will definitely be investing in more 3D printing capacity to try and speed things up, because I've done everything so far on a single Prusa Mini in my bedroom, and it takes forever. So Prusa is the type of printers that Neil actually uses in the cave. Well, they use the full-on ones, and they've got racks and racks of them. So Dale's got a little mini cave going on there printing these off. So thank you again to Reese for submitting that. Great project, and hopefully Dale manages to keep up with demand.
So actually, before we wrap this up, Dave, out of interest, what kind of price were these are these going for?
So this doesn't include the Pi Zero that you need for it, but the PCB and accessory kit was 55, and then the MIDI adapter, the case, and the stand were £6 each. So the total cost to me was £78.96. So when I add on the cost of the Pi 20W, when I manage to get one, because they're sold out everywhere and people are scalping them, when I do manage to get one, it'll bring the total cost up to just under £100. So to replace the MT32 and the SC55 and be able to change exactly which soft fonts and which model of MT32, I think that's a bargain.
Dave, I understand you're a bit of a role-playing fan. So, have you played Elden Ring at all?
No, I haven't, but it does seem like my cup of tea. So, as far as I understand, it's a sequel of sorts to the Dark Souls series. I do love an RPG, and that series is really highly regarded. People talk about it in the same way that they do about the Elder Scrolls series and so on. The series is renowned for being difficult, which is maybe a bit of an appeal to me. I like the idea of being difficult rather than the current RPG games from Bioware where you click and get the next bit of dialogue and click and get there. So I'm only now getting around to playing Dark Souls. So I've started playing Dark Souls and really struggled hard with it. I think my game playing skills are not what a young person's are. So I'm going to persevere with it, but I've been told to try again using a gamepad rather than a keyboard. So maybe I need a gamepad with a solitaire on it.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I've got to confess, not only have I not played it, but every time I keep glancing over the title, I assume it says Elder Scrolls.
No, Todd Howard is not trying to sell us the same game again.
It's a very similar font and look and feel to the box.
No, I understand.
Just me. Yeah. It just looks anyway. So that's the amount of times I read it as Elder Scrolls when I saw this new game emerging. But anyway, it is of course a 2022 action role-playing game developed by From Software and published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. Well, according to what I read on Tech Radar, anyway. And it is available on most platforms, including PlayStation 4. Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, Xbox One, PlayStation 5, don't know what one of those is, never seen one, and Microsoft Windows, and Game Boy.
What?
You heard me right, Dave. Yeah, Game Boy. Okay, so bear with me. So it's not actually available yet, but it's in development as a fan project by a developer and streamer, Shintendo. And it's described as a demake. So rather than like everybody else does with let's take the obvious example Doom, where they take Doom and they force it to run on something that it shouldn't, like a pregnancy test kit or something. Instead of doing that and squeezing it down into old hardware or less than adequate hardware, it's a complete remake of the game, but in the style of an 8-bit era adventure role-playing game. The kind of thing you would have seen on the NES or the Master System, or of course the Game Boy. So I guess the best way to explain it is if you imagine early Zelda games, that sort of top-down, sprawling landscape through which your adventurer traverses, it's that kind of view that he's gone for. So according to the story on Polygon.com by Nicole Clark, Shintendo and his friends love playing Elden Ring, but they also love development projects. So the story includes actually a video from Shintendo himself, where he shows off the gameplay and the graphics, but it is incomplete. And the way he himself describes it is he says it's the gameplay at the current form is a bit akin to playing Adventure on the Atari 2600. So certainly not complete yet. But don't dismiss it on that. The graphics actually look amazing. They look like something you'd have purchased and loved for the Game Boy back in the day. What are your thoughts on this, Dave?
Shintendo, shaken and not stirred. I'd probably struggle less with this game than I would with a real Elden Ring. I'm not always that keen on demakes if all they do is give you an inferior experience. But I like the idea of this one because it's not doing that. It's doing something that's to the strength of the platform it's on. So you're not going to be playing this thinking, I wish this was a real thing. A good demake for me has to either stretch a platform to the limits, or it has to create a game that suits the platform really well.
Yeah, no, that's good comment. I think you're right, and that's why it's all well and good to make Doom run and everything, but this is something completely different. Actually making it so that it suits not just the platform, but the era that the platform came out in, which is a completely different experience. So I've not played Elden Ring. I've not played many games of this style, but I certainly did play some. So I had limited exposure to Zelda. To be honest, I didn't really get into Zelda that much until Ocarina of Time on the N64. But, and I only really, sounds like a funny thing to say, I only discovered this week that I've actually played the SNES version, Link to the Past, when I was having a chat with somebody on Discord, and they mentioned playing Zelda on SNES, and I immediately said I didn't get into it until the N64, and then I thought, wait a minute, no, that does ring a bell. So I went and looked up the screenshots, and you know what it's like. You've forgotten something until you look at a screenshot or a video and you go, yes, I remember. I even remember that room. I remember going through there and, whatever. So I did, but I don't think I played it much. Those days for me, the SNES days, I was playing games for a short period and then taking them to this little shop that would give me cash for them so that I could go and play laser tag, which I was hopelessly addicted to. But that's a whole other story. The one I spent the most time on, though, was a little game. Not many people talk about it that much, but Axe Battler on the Sega Game Gear. And that is a bit like this as well. So it's, again, a top-down adventure game, role-play game, but then it goes into, so you'll be walking through the landscape and then it'll throw you into a battle against a creature. And so you know what these games are like. You're walking through, let's say you're walking through the forest. So top-down scrolling, very similar to Zelda. You're walking along and you can't see any enemies on the map screen that you're walking through. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you're in a battle. So you can't even avoid the battle. You can't even go somewhere else to sort of upskill your character and then go back for the battle. You're just forced into this battle. That's what I remember of that game. But I spent quite a lot of time on that on my Game Gear. One of the few games I actually spent a lot of time playing on my Game Gear, to be honest. And of course, everybody's been exposed to Pokemon, which gives me a similar feel to that. But the quality of the look and feel of this Elden Ring port, it really does sort of hark back to that style of graphic. You've got the castles, you've got the walls, you've got the gardens, the forest. Even though he's only shown very little, you really do get that sense from what I can see so far. So what about yourself, Dave? Were you into this style of role-playing game back in the day?
Well, yes and no. I was definitely into top-down RPGs. I played enormous amounts of hours in them. So many hours in Ultima 4, Ultima 5, and so on. Similar games like that, Demon's Winter, a few other games like that as well. And there's loads of similarities there, but I've never put any time into Japanese RPGs, JRPG style games. Not really. I've loaded them up in emulators and played them for a short time, but I'm never really stuck at one. So maybe I will try it one day. I don't know what the ideal JRPG for someone that's never played any of them to start with is. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments. Maybe that can be my homework. But I've played loads of RPGs, top-down ones, but not the JRPGs. As for this demake, I love the way it says you died right across the screen, which is a really necessary part of the Dark Souls game experience. I also like... Also, you mentioned the graphics. I also like that they've chosen a style of graphics that works well on the Game Boy. The Game Boy's good at some stuff, and if you've seen a bad Game Boy game where they've not really understood what the Game Boy can do, they tried to put graphics on there it doesn't suit. It looks terrible. But this little game has chosen graphics that do work well.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, demakes as well. I mean, that's an interesting topic in itself, and I'm just thinking of my exposure to those. On my Atari 2600 flashback, So I've mentioned, I don't know how many times I've mentioned that thing, but I purposely got the one I got because it's got an SD card slot. And so I could download ROMs. So I found a package of ROMs that has 1,001 ROMs on it. And as I'm cycling through, I'm going, what? Shadow of the Beast? What's that doing on here? So I have a play of that. And in fact, as we talk about this, I'll give some footage to Duncan. I'll record some footage and give it to Duncan to overlay. But yes, you can play Shadow of the Beast on the Atari 2600. Somebody's
Is
done
it better?
a demake for
Is
that.
it better than the Amiga game? Because it wouldn't be hard to be better.
Nothing. Stop it. Look, I can actually eject you from the recording room, I think.
It's a fantastic tech demo for the Amiga. It shows off what a fantastic platform it is.
Stop it. Moving on.
But the game itself, is the game fun? Is Shadow of the Beast any good, Chris? You played Shadow of the Beast in the Amiga.
So yes, I have, Dave. So moving on. Also, the other one I found on my flashcard ROM image was Halo. Yes, Halo for the Atari 2600. And actually, this fits in with this conversation because you've got the opening screen, again, footage for Duncan, and you can see the Halo rotating in the background, but in 2600 graphics. And then when you actually get into the game, it's kind of like a top-down RPG adventure game or shooting game kind of thing, and you're walking screen to screen and it's flip screen, So again, yes, it's Halo, but it's not going to be a first-person shooter on the 2600. So what have they done?
Gauntlet?
They've gone to, kind of like Gauntlet. I almost want to say almost like ET. Actually, it didn't play great, but it's there. Somebody's given it a go. They've gone, there you go. It's Halo. Off you go. Go and play it. So yeah. What about yourself? Played many demakes?
I played some. I don't know if they would call themselves demakes, but I played some on my Amstrad CPC. You could say the demakes. I mean, Pinball Dreams. I think everyone's seen Pinball Dreams with the Amstrad CPC. Tremendous. I mean, it's a port of it's an Amiga and PC game, but it's an Amiga game. It was ported to the PC. The PC could do what the Amiga did at that point, but it's at its heart, it's an Amiga game. It is maybe stretching to call it a demake because the play style remains mostly the same. You don't feel as if you're playing a cut down version of it. There's quite a few puzzle games that have been put to the CPC that are kind of demakes through there's a Spanish annual retro dev competition. Baba's Palace is one that I particularly like. It's a demake of another game that I forgot the name of. People bringing puzzle type games, indie games to the CPC. I quite like those. A lot of demakes though are people saying, well, I wonder if I can do this. And it's not necessarily the goal to make a game that's the best to play.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I really like this approach to not force an old device to play a modern game, but to essentially build a period correct port of the game instead. So the link can be found in the subreddit, and it was shared by Starcade 2084.
So our next story is Happy Birthday Blazkowicz, submitted by Reese again. He's in with 2 this week. So Reese has shared some news on one of his favourite games, Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein. I know we have German viewers, so I apologise for my terrible pronunciation, and maybe someone can definitively answer in the comments, because when I did some Googling, I got conflicting answers. I even tracked down a clip of John Romero pronouncing it as Wolfenstein, so I don't know how you actually pronounce it. Wolfenstein 3D is an id game inspired by a couple of earlier Apple II games. The first was back in 1981, so that's over 40 years ago. I think Wolfenstein is regarded widely as the first shooter in the FPS genre. And while it's not the first, it's the first one that went mass market, and it's certainly, I think, the first one that brought so many of the things that we have together in a way that lots of people saw and played. The first is actually Midi Maze on the Commodore Amiga. Sorry, no, the Atari ST. And Midi Maze, you can have up to 16 players in a fairly basic maze connected through MIDI ports, because the Atari ST came with MIDI ports. Why not use them? It wasn't a particularly famous game, and it didn't start the genre, but you could have, back in 1987, you could have had a room full of Atari STs playing what wouldn't happen for another 5 years' time with LAN parties. You could have done it. I don't know that I've not heard of anyone actually doing it though. So it didn't quite ignite things quite as much. Carmack and Romero were the programmers behind Wolfenstein, and before this they had made Hover Tank 3D and Catacombs 3D, and I think they came out in soft disk, and you can clearly see them using the same engine, refining it and improving the gameplay before they came out with Wolfenstein 3D, which they must have got enough right for it to become massively popular. And it was quickly followed by Doom, and of course we all know the rest. So Wolfenstein 3D was released on the 5th of May 1992. So Chris, did you play Wolfenstein back then when it was released?
Oh, heck yes. And if I'd have answered no to that one, I should quite rightly quit the show, Dave. That would be the end. That would be, if you haven't played Wolfenstein, come on, what are you talking about retro gaming for at all, or gaming in general? Actually, no, I haven't. Look, there's a caveat to this, okay? So on my first PC, my used Amstrad PC 2386 DX65, I only ever had the shareware version of Wolf 3D, and I don't think I'm alone in that. So when I say I've played it, I believe I've played it, but what I've actually played is the first 10 levels. And I played them over and over again at every difficulty level. And what I used to do to get an extended period of play out of a demo disc like that or a shareware disc was try and complete it without dying even once. So you can really stretch the enjoyability out of a shareware disc. What about yourself?
So I didn't play it back in the time when it was released, although obviously I've played it since then. Back then I was playing a game which people seem to ignore when they talk about FPS, Ultimate Underworld. Ultimate Underworld came out just before it. It's a 3D action RPG. Maybe Elden Ring owes its roots to it. With a fantastic engine from Looking Glass that went on to become System Shock and Bioforge, which are FPS games that are a bit more going on, a bit more complicated. I don't think they've aged as well as Wolf and Doom, etc. So I didn't play it back when it came out, but I did probably after I played Doom. So Wolf, Doom, Heretic, Hexen, Quake, Half-Life, System Shock, Bioforce, Duke, Unreal, Elite Force, or maybe it was the console ones, GoldenEye. Have you ever played an FPS? I assume not, since we know you don't play games.
Here we go again. Look, getting into that, it's interesting that you suck RPGs into this conversation about FPSs as well, because the first one I'm going to mention is actually really an RPG. So I mentioned Captive again last week, one of my favorite games on the Amiga, and really it's a sci-fi RPG or dungeon crawler, but it's kind of as close to a decent FPS as you could get on the A500 at the time. And Captive really did kind of feel like that because it was sci-fi, it was futuristic, and you're dealing with guns, not casting spells at things. So you're going around these corridors on a space station shooting the heck out of everything. So yeah, there was a sort of FPS element to it. But FPSs, Dave, mate, I love so many, and I've played most of them that I'm about to go through at the time of release. So this isn't just a random list of FPSs. These are ones that I've played and have fond memories for. Definitely not a definitive list. I've played even more than this, but these are the ones that really stick out for me. So Wolf 3D on PC, obviously. Doom on PC and the Jaguar. Alien vs. Predator on the Jaguar. GoldenEye on the N64, but also the remake on the Wii and the reloaded version on the Xbox 360. Also played it on the PS3, actually. Turok 2 and Perfect Dark on the N64. Time Splitters on the PS2 and 3. The Call of Duty franchise on Xbox 360 and PS3. Battlefield 3 on the PS3. Battlefield 4 on the PC and PS4. I must say, I enjoyed Battlefield 3 more than Battlefield 4 myself, but that's just me. Fear 1, 2, and 3. Played through them all on the PS3 and Xbox 360. Half-Life 1 and 2. Day of Defeat and Counter-Strike, which were, of course, mods to Half-Life. Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, Alien vs. Predator 1 and 2 on PC, and then the later versions that came on the PS3. Resistance, Fall of Man on the PS3. Quake 1 and 2. Unreal Tournament 1, 2, and 2003 and 2004. 2004, of course, being the one where they started adding in vehicular warfare, which really extended it out and made it feel a bit more battlefieldy. Duke Nukem 3D, and spent a lot of time in the build editor making my own maps for that. Duke Nukem Forever, which I first bought on the PS3, played it through to completion, and then went got rid of my PS3, have an Xbox 360, so bought it again on that, played it through to the completion on that, and again on the PC. Shadow Warrior on the PC. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which we mentioned last week on the PC, which I talked about with Neil. Requiem, Avenging Angel. Now, this is what I would call, somebody could correct me, but I reckon this is the first game that actually includes a bullet time-like ability. Most people would quote Max Payne for that, but actually Avenging Angel came first in 1999 and is a very underrated title in my personal opinion. Doom 3. Doom 2016, Doom 3 VR, Doom VFR, the entire Bioshock trilogy, including the added content. I've played through all of those. The entire Halo franchise. Actually, that's not true. When I say the Halo franchise, I'm really talking about 1, 2, and 3. I kind of lost interest after that because that was enough to much fun in multiplayer or single player. So I could go on, Dave, but look, they say I don't play games. I have to confess,
That was 50.
50. There we go. So Neil mentioned last week that he kind of got tired of FPSs, and I kind of had to bite my lip a little bit. I could never tire of an FPS. It's just not something that occurs to me. That for me is one of the ultimate ways. It just immerses you because it's first person, funnily enough. And in a way, I think it's great that, Neil's got his niche, I've got my niche, and we have a good lot of crossover in things like flight sims and racing games and that kind of thing. So I'm happy to fill a different gap. I absolutely love them. But look, that's not the question you asked. You said if I was to pick one, it would be Doom. And I say that because I played it back in the day, and I've recently played through Doom 1 and 2 again on my PS4. And it just holds up. It's as much fun now as it was back then. What about yourself?
So, first of all, I absolutely love Captive. I think if I hadn't played Dungeon Master first, then Captive might have been my favourite Atari ST dungeon crawler. It's such a good game. It's one of my favourite ST games. I think it's basically identical on the STs as it is on the Amiga. I put loads of hours into it, hundreds if not thousands. At the time when FPS games were getting really popular, I was into something else, MUDs. I was into online text adventures, RPGs. So I only dipped in and out. Nothing like anywhere like as deep and heavy as you were in. But I did play most of them around the time they were released, particularly the shareware ones. For me, the shareware version was enough for me to see. I was quite interested in the kind of tech demo of what they were doing, because they were always pushing ways of getting the sense of speed and adrenaline and so on, and the sounds and the graphics and so on. So the shareware versions of them, the demos, were often enough for me to get the taste for them. But I did play some, and I've just finished the shooter shelf of my collection, and on it I have Quake 1 and 2 and the 4 expansions, Quake 3, Doom 1, 2, Sigil, which I haven't played at all, which is the kind of remastered Doom, I understand, that came out years later, Half-Life, Opposing Force, Blue Shift, Heretic, Hexen, and Duke 3D. So those are all games that I did play a fair bit when they came out. I also have Elite Force. I've got System Shock and Bioforge in other parts of the collection, as well as all of the Dark Forces and Jedi Knight series. So I've got experience with it with lots of them, but I didn't really get deep into them like you did. I didn't really play them online very much. I was for online play. It was again, MUDs were everything I did. So as to a favourite, I think maybe I like the fantasy setting of Heretic better than the rest, but to be honest, it's Doom that I've played the most, and probably Quake second. So Doom's got to be it. I mean, they're such, both Doom and Quake are such good games, and it's the level design I think is great in them, the balance of the levels, how clever they are. I did also fire up some Wolfenstein yesterday when I was thinking about it, and because I wanted to play it again, remind myself, see what it's like. And although there is an ST version, I played it on the PC, and it's a bit more basic than I remembered. I remember it being a bit less basic than it is, but it's still good. I mean, it's the game. They got the gameplay from FPS. I was going to say right first time, because this wasn't their first one. This is the first very popular one, and they got it right first time. The basic gameplay spark is there. That's in all the Ed games, so it's already there in Wolf 3D. So John Romero and John Carmack are magic.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I like you. I went to play it yesterday, being its birthday, its anniversary. And so I went into my study nook in the other room and I fired up my beige IBM Aptiva and I hit F8 to go to the DOS prompt because it is a Windows 98 machine, I will be honest. It's far more powerful than Wolf 3D requires. I went to the DOS prompt. I really thought I had Wolf installed on that machine and I'd love to have had a quick go on its birthday, but alas, it wasn't installed on the machine. And it was getting late. I had Doom, I had Shadow Warrior, Duke 3D's on there, a whole heap of other games were on there. X-Wings on there, but no, there was no Wolf 3D. Gutted. So I went to bed, Dave. It's funny though, thinking about that what Wolf 3D has meant for FPF games. Everyone sees Doom as the beginning of it all. Usually when you say what was the first FPS, actually people quote Doom more than they quote Wolf 3D as the genesis of the modern FPS. But I instantly think, but what about Wolfenstein? That's my first thought when people say that.
Yeah, and if you're going to say that Wolfenstein's the start of it, then what about Catacombs 3D? I mean, a lot of the gameplay is there in Catacombs. Wolfenstein's the first one that it really caught fire, though. That's the first one that everybody played and got popular and got people talking about. So 30 years on, and FPS games are still supremely popular. The kids now call these games boomer shooters. And it's not because of the satisfying booms from the shotguns, it's because they're calling us all old boomers. They're playing Fortnite and whatever other remixes of the Battle Royale for FPS around now, but I think we can all agree that Wolfenstein 3D is the real father of the genre.
Oz RetroComp is back, Dave. He's been out of the running on stories recently, but he's back in the subreddit and at it again, and with a rather interesting link, I think. So the link is to a YouTube video from Science Elf, and it's a new take on an old problem. And the problem being, how do you browse the internet on a classic computer? Before we get into this, is this something you do, Dave? Do you use your old kit to connect and actually read stuff online?
Well, I don't like the modern internet. I want to bring back web pages created in Notepad. I don't like dynamically generated content loading with tracking and ads and so on. There is a search engine for old browsers called FrogFind, which I have used. It's not very easy doing it though. I've used it on my Windows 98 PCs, but they really do struggle with almost every website because most websites have just thrown everything out in favour of the new ways. So even with FrogFind, which is a search engine that does work because other search engines don't, even with that to find things, you don't really, you're not able to find much.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I currently don't connect most of my internet, my old kit to the internet, but part of that's paranoia about the viruses and knowing how exposable they are, But what Science Elf
don't expose yourself to the internet then?
No, I don't expose my on the old kit. On the new kit.
On the new kit.
Oh, I don't expose myself on the internet. We've gone to a whole different podcast now. Right, let's get back into the story. So anyway, Science Elf details the challenges from obviously the lack of Wi-Fi is one on old devices, because these days we seldom sit in the same room as the modem, through to modern pages not displaying correctly on older devices, which is what you were just touching on there. And he's not shy of discussing the fact that there are existing solutions, obviously. Ethernet to Wi-Fi bridges for the hardware side obviously exist. And the excellent way to view into the web as it used to be is, of course, the Wayback Machine run by archive.org. And that allows you to view web pages as they were in yesteryear. And that's a really good way of doing it. But what he's done is he's basically created an internet time machine in a box. Hence the
TARDIS,
IT
blue
reference. No, a little black box. A little black box. Hence the IT crowd reference of, it's the internet gen, because that's what this thing really does remind me of. I couldn't resist. So the box he shows actually has an OLED display on the front of it and a knob on the top, but we'll come to talk about what they do in a moment. So this isn't the internet in a box. Let's be
No.
clear here. No, so it's not the same as the IT crowd internet. It's not in the box. But what it is it's a combination of existing solutions and just done better and made very simple. So it's a bridge between Ethernet and Wi-Fi, first and foremost. So that solves that hardware problem. But it's also an automatic pass-through to the Wayback Machine via an automated proxy. And it does this invisibly. So as far as I can make out anyway, on your retro computer, and he's using an original iMac for most of his video, you type the address of the website that you want to visit that existed in the 90s, and that's it. So as far as you're concerned as a user, you're seeing that period correct website with none of the compatibility issues and none of the surrounding Wayback Machine interface. So you don't even realize you're using the Wayback Machine. So your 90s computer is simply browsing the internet as if it's in the 90s. And it gets better. Okay. And when I saw this bit, this really made my jaw drop. So using the OLED display and the rotating knob on the top of the machine, you literally twiddle the knob and you select the year you want to view, and it'll even change on the fly. So if you're viewing the internet, so you're viewing a web page, one of the examples he shows is obviously the Apple website. He's viewing the web page. I can't remember what years he chose, but let's say it's 2002. He's viewing the 2002 Apple web page on his retro Mac. And then he turns the dial on top of his internet machine to say 1999, and the browser refreshes, and he's now seeing what that website looked like in 1999 rather than 2002 on the fly. It's absolutely insane. What do you make of this, Dave?
Another Raspberry Pi project, fantastic. I am going to try it. I've been inspired to try it. Do you know what I'd like better, though? I'd like it if more websites were made that were compliant with the old simple standards and didn't need modern browsers to view them. I'm astonished how well this project actually works, though, after watching the video. I didn't think it worked as good as this. It works brilliantly. It's absolutely it's mind-blowing how well it works.
It does. I can see why he's called it a time machine. It feels like a time machine when you're watching him view it. It's insane. But I like what you said there about if only modern websites worked on the old kit. So, I mean, I haven't actually connected my Amiga up yet. It's something I've sort of shied away from doing. And part of that is because I know most of the web won't work. Fortunately, people that are putting things like WHD load packages out there and stuff have made their websites so that they work with old browsers such as, those that you
that's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah. But in my view, just like yourself, modern websites should just work to a point. And why I say that is part of my previous career. We talked a little bit about this last week, is in how to use technology in education. And as part of that, I had to really become across accessibility standards. So the WCAG 2 compliance from w3.org. And in there, and I used to mention these over and over again, mainly when mobile technology was becoming a thing and people were jumping on with that and then not realizing that you had to create content for both platforms, not just one or the other. And you saw that a lot, in many industries. And in the guidelines, so 1.3 guideline, content has to be adaptable. You have to create content that could be presented in different ways. For example, a simpler layout without losing information or structure. Guideline 4.1 is compatible. Maximize compatibility with current and future user agents, including assistive technologies. And why that's important for accessibility is because somebody might be using a browser, which is a text-only browser. If you're compliant, that website should give you access to the information completely unhindered, regardless of the device or the software that you've chosen to connect to that site. That's how it should work. That's just good design. And it's not just about disability. It's just about good design. I always use the example of a wheelchair ramp. Well, you don't have to be in a wheelchair to walk up it. Everybody benefits. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's how I see that kind of thing. So text-only browsers, screen readers, that kind of thing. If you're designing a website to work with those, well, guess what? If you're connecting via a piece of retro kit, security certificates aside, let's be honest, they're a new thing and they're a necessary thing. So they do still create a rock for our backs. But those aside, we should be able to view these sites unhindered even on our old machines. That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, standards compliant, proper web pages and not the modern nonsense. Often, if I'm looking up an old fan site for old games, it's just routine for the links to be dead and gone. And it does feel as if the internet we grew up with is buried under the new one, just forgotten.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. We've discussed it on the show before, but I have resisted. I mentioned it again just now. I have resisted tainting my Amiga machines with an internet connection.
Tainting the internet with your Amiga machines.
That's not the way round I said it, Dave. Watch it, or I'll go on to talking about the fact that that MIDI devices, Dave, they're just things that Atari ST users talk about. They never use them. Anyway, we could start the whole playground war up again. Did you? What did you use them for? Music.
Recording keyboards. Recording and playing back on keyboards.
There you go. So they were built for you. There was you and 2 other users. All right. But anyway, look. Well, I forgot where I've got to now because we've gone back to the playground war. It's all good. But yeah, you know, for something like this project, my Windows 98 IBM Aptiva, well, that's probably a good usage case. You know, perhaps that machine could benefit from an internet connection. If nothing else, so I can download drivers easier. Or just maps for Duke Nukem 3D is probably what I would actually use it for.
Yeah, it's handy if you're doing something on a Windows 98 computer. There's times at which you would go to the internet to do something, and to then have to do it on a different, separate computer, put it across on an FTP or however you want to do it across there. It's not great. So this hopefully would allow you to do those kind of things.
Yeah. It's funny, when I first went to set up that machine, the irony was I was browsing on my modern machine to find the drivers I needed to make the machine work, putting them on a USB stick, plugging that into the Aptiva, and then realizing it doesn't have a driver to view a storage device through the USB port, because that was a new thing. And so that was an update. And then I find myself writing CDRs and all of those kind of bizarre things just so I could get drivers across. So yeah, an internet connection would be a helpful thing. So I think, anyway, it's a cool thing. It's nearly the 90s internet in a black box. It solves some problems and it does it in a very sleek way. So, you know, head over to the subreddit and check it out if you think that's of interest to you. And on that, as always, I do just want to thank all of you that do contribute. But I also want to encourage more people. Look, if you're new to the show, don't be shy. Literally, the stories that we choose to cover, the majority of the stories we cover are found by you, the listeners, and chosen by way of upvoting by you as well. So head over there.
Yeah, upvote the stories you want us to talk about. The more the story gets upvoted, that's you telling us this one. We want you to talk about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually we would go to community question of the week here, Dave. But
so
thanks to the magic of time travel,
just turn the knob.
Oh yes, of course. Well, that's why we need the internet, the internet time machine. This would actually be a good use case in the future. But yeah, the listeners have not had chance to respond to the question of the week because they haven't even heard it at time of recording. So I'll ask you. Okay, so the question was that the listeners would have now heard by now, but you haven't heard it yet. What's the earliest recording of a game or system that you did ever? How did you capture it? Was it RF into a VHS, or did you point a camera at a screen? What did you do? Who did you show it to? Did they stop being your friend? Because that's a really nerdy thing to do. Do you still have the footage, most importantly, and would you share it with us if you did?
I'm afraid to tell you that I've racked my brains and I cannot remember ever recording footage in the way you've described. I just never been interested in doing it. The most I've ever done is try to record some game footage, but only on the machine itself and only as a set of input instructions that the game can then replicate through. I've never been into content creation at all. I've never wanted to make videos, so I've just never done it. It's never been my kind of thing. And imagine you might, because you do have your own channel. You like making videos. Never been a thing for me. But I do have a device. It's the one that Neil recommended, and when I saw it really cheap on eBay, I like to grab a bargain on eBay, so I got it. And I do have a secret idea for a project that I might do with it. I'm not going to say anything about. But I've watched so many thousands of hours of other people's captured footage. I love a Let's Play series on YouTube. I've watched so many. At the moment, I watch a lot of a channel called Gears of Games because he does dungeon crawlers. So that's captured footage there. I am a huge consumer of it, but I never actually make it myself. What about you?
Nah. That's fair enough. Yeah, I don't capture very often. In terms of the first one I captured, we discussed that in last week's show that you haven't listened to yet. But yeah, there were some stories about connecting my Amiga up to a VHS player, not to record game footage, but for projects for GCSE and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just an interesting space. And that question came off the back of a story we covered about a channel that's popped up where a guy has unearthed some gameplay VHS tapes that he made back in the day, and he's making them available on YouTube. So it's sort of quite an interesting new space. So look, for those of you that that have been contributing to that question of the week on the subreddit, obviously we will cover your answers in next week's show. You haven't been forgotten, and we'll set a new question up for you in that show as well. So just an extra week to get your for us to go through your questions and get our heads together on that. So Dave, seriously, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for filling in for Neil and for sharing your experiences.
I enjoy being here. It's a great experience doing a little bit of research and chatting to you. So I hope at some point in the future I'll come back again. And thank you for the listeners for bearing with us. I hope they don't mind that Niels isn't here this week. So thank you for your attention.
Cool. And all the best to Neil as well with everything that's going on with the opening of the cave, the face-to-face events, including colouring in. Keep inside those lines, Dave. That's all. That's the only tip I can give you.
Sharpening my crayons.
Fantastic. Lots of beige. Beige, in fact, just beige. That's all you need. Actually, yes. What's your cat's name?
Cat is called Johnny. Johnny is my cat. He has been underneath the recording area for most of the thing, but he's my pal. He is always where I am. I work from home, so he's always beside me.
So for those of you listening on the podcast, Johnny's been there. Is it an all black cat?
He's an all black cat. Yep.
Yeah, beautiful. And Dave has been sitting in front of his wonderful shelves full of his games collection. You mentioned at the beginning, Dave, that you've pretty much finished. Is that what's the parameters around your collecting? Is it only the games you had back in the past, or?
So I've collected all the games that I had in the past that I either really liked or feel there's unfinished business there. I've collected other games in those series. So all the gold box games, for example, the D&D gold box games, I didn't play them all. I played a few, but I've now got them all because I want to play them all. I've collected games from all those until my shelves are full. So I now I've got all the D&D games. I have all the Infocom games, all the shooters I won, all the Sierra games and compilations, the LucasArts games, I've got those, all the Star Wars games, all the Star Trek games, loads of Atari ST games that I played, most Origin games. You can see a line of Psygnosis games there, loads of SSI games, all the Ultimas, the Rainbird games there in the little blue boxes. So I've now filled the shelves. There's not really room for anything else. So if I don't have it and I want it, something else will have to go.
Oh, that's a good position to be in, and yeah, a hard one as well. Yeah, that's fantastic. No, thanks for sharing that. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll tune in everybody next week. Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil Thomas from RMC The Cave and Chris Winter from 005 AGIMA. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.